Hi everyone, and welcome back to your amazing Vet Student podcast. We are here with Margot.
Hi.
And Diana.
Hi.
And today we're diving into a topic that's close to all of our hearts: animal welfare and what it looks like today in 2025. Since World Animal Day was just a few days ago on October 4th, we thought it would be the perfect moment to reflect on how humans treat animals, not just pets, but also farm animals, animals in research, and those used for entertainment. So in this episode, I'll walk you through what animal welfare really means today, the milestone we've achieved, the challenges we'll still face, and the new trends shaping the field. Are you ready to begin?
Yes. Sure.
So first, what comes to your mind when you hear the term animal welfare? And it's just gut feeling, no definition yet.
I would say it's a multitude of aspects about how an animal can live and what we can consider a happy life. If we just talk about feelings without putting any definition.
And what it's good for him to have a good life, maybe.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just gut feelings. We can say that it's all that make an animal happy, well in his life, everything.
And its needs.
Yeah, well, if you talk about a definition, it's quite what you said actually. A widely accepted definition is that animal welfare is a state of physical and mental well-being of an animal, reflecting how it perceives its situation and how well its needs and expectations are met. So it's not just about making sure an animal doesn't suffer, it's also about making sure the animal has positive experience. So to assess the animal welfare, we can use concepts like the 5 freedoms introduced by the Farm Animal Welfare Council in the 70s. Do you know what the 5 freedoms are?
Alimentary freedom.
Yes, freedom from hunger and thirst. That's the first one.
Yeah, there is a freedom from fear and negative
emotions.
That's the 5th one, the last one. Do you know any other?
I remember one, the freedom of expressing natural behavior. And I think about others, but I don't remember now. Yes, I have one. It's from physical pain, suffering.
Well, obvious one. I forget it.
Diseases. Yeah, it's always the most common that we forget. So.
And just last one, you like one, just one.
Well, I don't think
I don't have it right now.
It's a basic one too, but as you said, it's the one we forget at the time. It's the freedom from discomfort.
Oh yes, okay.
So to sum up, we have the freedom from hunger and thirst, the freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, freedom to express natural behavior, freedom from fear and distress. So as we can see with that, modern welfare isn't just about freedom from suffering, but it's also about everything mental and physical. Also, in 2018, the French ANSSI, French Agency for Food, Environmental and Occupational Health and Safety, added that animals have expectations and can experience positive emotions. So today we talk about positive welfare, things like enrichment, social interaction, and opportunities to explore their environment. Girls, do you think these days most people realize that welfare also includes mental health and just not food and shelter and physical health?
I think that increasingly people do associate welfare with mental health, in addition to physical health, safety, and food security. But however, this awareness seems relatively recent and is only just beginning to be discussed and taught.
Yeah, I do agree, but I do think people realize it, and the real challenge is more like learning how to read those signals of psychological health, because they are harder to quantify, and a pet owner will, for example, be more ready to recognize if their dog is thirsty, if its water bowl is empty, for example, then realize this dog is bored or anxious. And so yeah, I do think it's more the issue that we have, because also the animal language can be misinterpreted sometimes, which doesn't help evaluate the emotional state. For example, many people will assume that a wagging tail for a dog is always a sign of happiness, while sometimes it's just a mechanism to relieve the stress with what we call now calming signal. So even if emotional well-being is theoretically taken into account, I think it's not always well assessed and the perception is highly subjective.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that point, that sometimes the owners don't see the signs that show that their animal are not feeling well mentally. But it's getting better and better with education and, for example, for dogs, the dog trainers on the social medias sharing their professional views on the things.
Yeah, I do agree. Now we have a lot of content to help us, and I think a lot of people are willing to do the work and to learn about it.
Yeah, I think the most difficult actually is like for cats, for example, or animals like farm animals. That's more.
They hide very their emotion, their pain, and everything. So it's like natural behavior, an instinctive one to protect themselves against predators.
Yeah, because if they show that they are not well, it's like can attract predators. So now that we have all the bases and the definitions, we can take a quick journey through history and to see how we got here. So back in ancient time, animals were mainly seen as a tool or property, and their moral and emotional lives weren't considered at all. During the Enlightenment, thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau in France and Jeremy Bentham in England asked critical questions like, can animals suffer and should we care? But it's not until the 19th century that we've had real change in terms of laws and legislation. For example, the two first associations for animal created were in the UK in 1824 and in France in 1845. And then the first law for animal welfare created was in France in 1850, and it was the Grammont Law, and it was the first legislation condemning public abuse of animals.
That's interesting.
Then, in the 20th century, things accelerated. For example, with Ruth Harrison's book that exposed intensive farming conditions. Then there's the Brandbell Report in 1965 that established the basis for the 5 freedom that we talked about before and laid the foundation for modern welfare assessments. Then, more or less 10 years later, the Farm Animal Welfare Council formalized these 5 freedoms operationally. And lastly, for this century, in 1997, there's the Treaty of Amsterdam, where the EU recognized animals as sentient beings.
Finally.
Yeah, it was finally time. Then moving to the 21st century, in 2013, the EU banned animal testing for cosmetic products, which was a major shift in laboratory animal welfare. However, animals remain essential in some medical and pharmaceutical research. In 2015, France added to its civil code that the animals are living beings endowed with sensitivity, followed by Portugal in 2017. And then lastly, between 2017 and 2024, there's the creation of the European Reference Center for Animal Welfare, covering the welfare for pigs, poultry, ruminants, equines, and aquatic animals. So since the beginning of animal welfare history, we've gone from tools to sentient being with legal recognition, and it's a massive social shift. Girls, do you feel that people truly treat animals as sentient beings, or is it still something that mainly exists on paper?
Oh, I believe that on individual level, people are becoming more aware of animal as sentient being. However, this awareness isn't universal. Although animals are officially recognized as a sentence under the law, in practice, there are many areas where this recognition is not truly applied or respected.
Yeah, even in the individual level, I think there is some things that stay in the sense of, for example, a fish will be often more viewed as a low maintenance pet or even sometimes like a decorative thing or for children. And also maybe because the price of the animal it itself doesn't encourage to really have a deep conversation about owning this animal, having the responsibility of it, etc. But I think a lot of people can be like, okay, if my fish die, that's okay, I can replace it easy. A type of thing that you will never heard, I hope, for a dog.
Yeah,
And even for a fish, but I think it's a different perception in the sentient being. And so, for example, small animals or animals that are different from dogs and cats have a different stature. And this disparity for me is partially due to the lack of knowledge that we have with them, which leads to their suffering being less perceived. And it's also linked to the fact that the human and animal interaction is very different from a dog, for example, because you don't pet your fish or throw a ball at it. But these differences between pets, you can also find them with farm animals, for example, or wild animals too. Of course, it's not a generality and not everybody think about and like that, but I do think it's a bias that we all have about the interaction that we have with them and the way we see them.
Well, for going back to the fish, the fact that years ago we can just win a golden fish in place like fun fair, and the golden fish will stay at home like for 3 or 4 weeks, and after the family don't really know how to care him, don't really know what he needs, so many golden fish finally dies because of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why I think there is a real difference in the way that we perceive animals in terms of sensitivity. Um, so yes, for example, you will never heard someone say like, "Oh, my fish is suffering." It's rarer, I think. But I do think today many things have changed, and often like pets have a real place in the family, for example, as a full member. And actually, I've seen a survey by the American Pet Products Association last year that shows that more than 90% of dogs and cats owners, for example, consider their animals as part of the family. So it quite confirms that idea of seeing the animal as a being.
Yeah. To go back on the fish, I think that it's not that they are less expressive, but we know more of the body language of dogs, cats, and even farm animals.
Yes, farm animals.
Than fish. It's very difficult to see if a fish is sick. So I think people might see them as object because of that. Obviously, they're not object, but some people just don't see the life coming from fish.
No, I agree. And I also think there is always the perception of our feelings that we put on an animal. Is sadness really a thing that's all type of animals can really understand? That's a question. And I think there is some research, but we don't have the answer about everything. And it's also the point of trying to find criteria that are something that you can put on all of the species. And for example, having an animal that has good mental states is also complicated to see, but there is some stuff. So there is things like stereotypy that you can see on an animal, and you can clearly understand and evaluate the mental health of the animal like that. But at the same time, as you said, it's quite complicated to see these type of things in species that you know less.
Yeah, I agree with you. And well, to go back on the stereotypical behavior, I think that most people don't really know what they are. For example, we always see that fishes go around and around and around in their aquarium, but most people don't know that this is actually a stereotypical behavior, and it actually shows that the fish is not well. But if most of people don't know the signs that animals are not well, like they will not understand. It's very difficult to assess and to understand that. It's just a lack of knowledge. Okay, so now that we have all of the legal context, let's dive into the real-life applications today in 2025 in the different fields using animals. Beginning with the farm animals. Over the last decade, the farming industry has seen major changes in Europe when it comes to animal welfare. For example, the European Union's farm to fork strategy is a cornerstone in this transformation. Its goals include phasing out cages farming for all species and implementing animal-based indicators to directly assess welfare on farms. In addition, several painful practices have been banned or restricted in several countries. For example, live castration of piglets without anesthesia, and many countries have implemented pain relief alternatives. And even some nations have banned the culling of male chicks at hatch, and some are rolling out technologies like in ovosexing to avoid it. And this whole reflects a broader commitment to reducing unnecessary suffering. Finally, for farm animals, some farms are now required to appoint animal welfare officers, and these officers monitor living conditions, oversee animal care, and ensure that welfare standards are followed. I wanted to ask you, girls, do you think having welfare officers on farms is enough to improve everyday life for farm animals? Or don't you think that other measures like staff training and public awareness aren't just as important?
I do think it's a whole. The formation needs to be complete and in all of the different aspects. It cannot just be one person that is in charge of the well-being of animals in a field that is about being with animals and managing animals and beings. So I don't think it's enough, and I do think it needs to be a complete program.
Well, as you said, the problem is that there are usually very few inspectors for a huge number of farms. That means visits are rare, sometimes, so that's superficial, I think. And there isn't always a really follow-up afterwards. So even if the rules are there, if the staff isn't properly trained, mistakes still happen. Animal get stressed and sometimes even mistreated, often just out of a lack of knowledge or practice. And that's why other measures are important, like as you said, the staff training. It's a key point, but also the consumer pressure, label, ethical products, awareness campaigns. All of this pushes farm to raise their standards, I think. There is a 2020 study showing that when animals are poorly housed or fed, they get sick more often, which means way more antibiotics are used. But on farms with well trained staff and a focus on prevention, animals stay healthier and antibiotics are barely needed. So clearly, welfare officials are useful, but they're not enough on their own. If we really want to improve animals' everyday life, we need a mix with trained staff, solid evaluation system, and certainly a genuine public awareness.
Yeah, I totally agree with you too. I actually have nothing to add because you said it all. Like, it's useful, yes, but it's not the only measure that needs to be applied. Like Margot said, the program needs to be completed with other measures. So nothing to add about that. So that was for the farm animals. Now we can talk about the lab animals, the animals used in research in laboratory. So over the past decade, laboratory animal welfare in Europe has undergone significant changes. For example, research labs now follow the 3R principle. So it's the first R is for replacement, like using alternatives such as advanced cell cultures, computers modeling, or organ-on-chip technology whenever possible. Then the second R is for reduction. Well, it's to design studies that require fewer animals through better statistics and shared data. And then the last R is for refinement, and it's for improving housing, enrichment, and procedures to minimize pain and stress. So, girls, what do you think about that?
I think this idea is a good idea, and actually, the European Union has one of the strictest framework worldwide in terms of animal research, and it's governed by a directive that is the 2010/63 EU, which allows to have a regulation on the use of animal, and every project, for example, must go through an ethical review process. Research protocols must justify the number of animals used, minimize suffering, and follow the 3 R's principles, as you said. And also, you have veterinarian that have a central role in all of this process and in the research because they are legally responsible for overseeing animals' welfare in research facilities, ensuring that housing, enrichments, analgesia, and human endpoints are respected. And in many institutions, animal ethics committees include veterinarians, for example, who can block or require modifications to any project that does not meet welfare standards. So I think it's things that have been implemented in the research and that are very good.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how labs have improved in this field.
Obviously, there is a lot of issues because despite this strict regulation and the veterinarian rules that you can see, I've seen on a website named Cruelty Free International that they have done some research and almost nearly 49% of the procedures in the EU were still classified as causing moderate to severe suffering in 2022 for like animals in research. So that shows that there is an ethical debate that is far from being resolved. But this subject has a lot of questions. It's not like a white and or black debate. It's very complicated to assess this topic. But yes, there is definitely an ethical question about not just whether we should use animals in research, but also how they are treated and under what justification, and whether alternatives are truly being considered first.
It's a very complicated subject because we cannot really assess if laboratory are treating right animals because they actually need to test some products, but we can control what the products are doing on the animals, and we actually need that also for medicine. It's a very complicated subject and controversial subject, and ethically speaking,
It raised some questions.
Yes.
For sure.
And now that we've seen the application in lab animals, we can talk about pets. When I'm telling pets, it's like dogs, cats, and like companion animals.
Yeah.
So, over the past few years, several European countries have updated their laws to improve the welfare of companion animals. So, for example, in France, in January 2024, selling dogs and cats in pet shop is prohibited. And since October 2022, anyone adopting a dog or a cat must sign a commitment knowledge certificate, ensuring they understand the responsibilities and needs to the animal. What do you think about these adoption requirements? Do you think they make a real difference in preventing impulsive adoptions?
I don't think it plays a role. I don't think it does everything because if someone really wants a pet and doesn't want to bother with that, it's actually very easy to go on a website and to buy one that will be not from a ethical breeder or anything, but you can find still furry pets quite easily. I do think it makes a difference, but I think it had a greater impact if the regulation on the websites and
if it was more controlled, like everything was more controlled. And yeah, something difficult about the certificate is that people just can sign it without even reading it, without even paying attention to it. And just signing a paper does not mean that you will actually follow the...
No, that's true, but because you cannot do it the same day that you buy it, I think it can discourage some people, or at least avoids the situation of I'm gonna buy, for example, a dog for my partner and then bringing the dog home and but I don't want a dog. So because there is this procedure, maybe it will reduce a bit that. And but again, you're right, it's still very easy to do.
Yeah, it helps like in papers, but there's always situations where
people find a way to... So that was for France, but I also have examples in the UK, where there's the Animal Welfare Act of 2006 that requires owners to meet their pets' welfare needs, with penalties including fines up to £20,000 and up to 51 weeks in prison for neglect or cruelty to an animal. Now let's talk about wild animals, and especially those used in entertainment and tourism. In Europe, the use of wild animals in traveling circuses and dolphinariums is being phased out. Countries are recognizing that animals like dolphins, elephants, and big cats experience stress and physical limitations in these environments. And zoos and aquariums are also under stricter welfare regulations, often using enrichment programs to stimulate natural behavior and monitoring stress indicators to assess the animal mental well-being. What do you think about these enrichment programs? Do you know things about them?
well, I think that there is a positive side of these enrichments, like the food puzzles, the toys. It allows to creating interesting environment or encouraging social interaction that can help to reduce boredom and repetitive behaviors like pacing for big cats or head bobbing in birds, and it can let animals do things closer to what they do in the wild, like hunting, climbing, or solving problems. For example, some orangutan in zoos have been seen learning to use tools thanks to this kind of setups. But of course, it's still artificial. It doesn't replace a real ecosystem with wide territories, unpredictable interaction, and freedom to like choose partners. And for example, a dolphin in a tank, even if it has balls and hoops to play with, can't swim 10 or of kilometers like it would be in the ocean. So in some spaces like elephants, big whales or large sharks, they are really sensitive, as you say, to threats. They need a lot of space, and they can still develop behavioral problems despite enrichment. So, from what I've read, people think this program are more about making captivity look acceptable to the public than really improving animal welfare. But well, other see modern zoos that do those enrichments really useful to protecting endangered species and raising awareness. So I think if you compare it to sanctuaries or semi-natural reserve where animals get more space and freedom, the zoos and the aquariums are less for the animal welfare, but they currently do as much as they can. But sometimes it's not enough, and some animals do not need to be in captivity.
No, I do agree. Enrichment's program can partially reduce stress and stimulate natural behavior. But as Irina said, in my opinion, the ability of a wild animal to adapt to captivity depends a lot on the species, the space they require, and the climate they need. Because, for example, it's legitimate to question whether a polar bear can truly thrive in an enclosure during a hot summer in Europe, regardless of enrichment. And so, yes, it does help, but for me, it's not a miracle solution to replace the lack of space and environmental congestion. And as you said, for elephants, for example, an elephant can walk up to 50 kilometers a day in the wild, something that you cannot reproduce in a zoo. And it makes them live about 15 to 20 years less on average in captivity, mainly because of stress, obesity, and food problems linked to the restricted movement. So all of that are quite interesting when you think about having captive animals, because even with the best enrichment, it will not replace the condition.
Yeah, it's a good effort, but it's not the ideal.
If you really want to conserve endangered species, wild sanctuaries or semi-natural reserve may be the better idea.
But I also understand that in some case it's complicated to apply.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's always complicated to assess all of the needs of an animal and also what we can do in real life and the means that we have.
We need to balance between all of that.
About that, how much do you think public awareness and education can influence the treatment of wild animals in entertainment? Do you see a shift in tourist behavior, for example?
Well, I believe public awareness and education can have a significant impact on the treatment of wild animal in entertainment. When people understand the needs and sentience of these animals, they are more likely to avoid attraction that exploit them and are going to support ethical alternative. And over the past few years, more visitors are choosing sanctuaries or reserved that prioritize animal welfare rather than traditional shows or encounters that involve stress or poor living conditions. And education campaigns, social media, and documentaries all play, I think, a major role in driving this change by making people question practice they might previously have accepted with it without thinking.
Yeah, I agree. For me, most people don't intend to harm animals when they go to swim with a dolphin or ride an elephant. Uh, but it's often that they don't realize the suffering behind certain practices, the way that these animals are kept, and the coercion that they have been trained with. So it's less a matter of cruelty from the visitor and more a lack of knowledge about the true needs of wild animals, which are very different from domestic ones. So it's quite normal that we don't always know well about it. But I also think culture plays an important role in all of that. A good example is bullfighting. It doesn't involve wild animals in the same way because it's not, but it shows how traditions influence what people tolerate as treatment too. So, for example, bullfighting is increasingly criticized as cruel in a lot of areas, but yet it remains defended in parts of Spain, Portugal, and southern France, where it's seen as a part of the cultural heritage. And so this shows that when we talk about animal entertainment, public perception is not only shaped by education, but also by cultural values and history, which I think it's also interesting. And that said, I do believe things are changing. Over the past decade, we've seen clear shifts both in legislation and in public demands. And according to the World Animal Protection, for example, more than 250 travel companies, including big names like TripAdvisor and Expedia, have stopped selling and promoting tickets for attraction involving direct contact with wild animals. So I think it's very cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
And so this shows that tourists are becoming more sensitive to this issue, and businesses are also adapting. So yes, there is a growth of demand for ethical alternative, wildlife watching in natural reserve, photography tours, or safaris under strict rules, for example. But I also think there is something to watch about is the mass tourism that can also start to grow with these demands.
Yeah, indeed, it's something to take in consideration because activities like safaris are not compatible with mass tourism.
For sure.
And now, let's change a bit our perspective and talk about the application of animal welfare in veterinary practice. The veterinary practice is an area where real progress has been made over the last 30 years. For example, just with the pain management, it has dramatically improved, and today animals undergoing surgery receive modern anesthesia protocols tailored to their species, along with postoperative pain relief. Even chronic conditions like osteoarthritis are better managed thanks to new treatment, for example, the Librela injection, which help reduce joint pain in dog. Also, preventive medicine has also become a cornerstone of veterinary practice, as routine checkups, vaccination, dental care, and early disease detection all contribute to animals living longer, healthier, and happier lives. Education plays a big role too, as vet schools now integrate animal welfare training into their curricula. For example, in France, the chaire Bien-être Animal was created in 2018 to provide dedicated courses and practical modules on welfare. And in Belgium, the University of Liège offers similar modules for the 2025 and 2026 academic year. This ensures that the future veterinarians don't just treat diseases, they also understand the emotional and cognitive needs of animals, and they are now trained to think about the animal's mental state, stress indicator, and behavior. Besides, since 2024, school curricula from primary to high school teach respect for animals as part of moral and civic education.
As young as you start, as better it is.
That's true.
Now that we have seen the application of animal welfare in different fields, we can talk about current challenges. Because yes, even in 2025, despite all the progress we've discussed, there are still major challenges in animal welfare across the world. For example, back to intensive farming. It continues in many regions, and welfare standards vary widely between countries. While some farms follow strict regulations, others struggle due to economic pressure, leading to situations where profits sometimes conflict with welfare goals. Another challenge is the transport of live animals. Even with regulation limiting journey times and ensure rest periods, long-distance transport remains stressful for animals. When you think about intensive farming goals, do you believe regulations alone can be enough to protect animals if we implement them well, or is a cultural shift among farmers equally important?
Well, regulations can definitely play a crucial role in improving animal welfare in intensive farming. For example, law banning battery cages for laying hens have been introduced in many European countries, which has helped reduce the suffering of those animals. As we said earlier, there are also strict rules around the use of antibiotics to prevent antimicrobial resistance and ensure better animal health. But of course, this regulation only works if they're properly enforced. A study by the Social Market Foundation, the SMF, published in October 2024, found that only 2.3% of animal welfare violations in the UK were actually prosecuted, which suggests that the existing laws are not being applied effectively. Even with regulations, cruel practice still happen in intensive farming. For instance, handling chicken by their legs, which was previously banned under the EU law, but was legalized in the UK in 2024, raising major ethical concerns. Investigations have also shown that farms certified by animal welfare labels like RSPCA Assured, the Royal Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, sometimes keep animals in unacceptable condition, which questions the effectiveness of the certifications. Well, that's why cultural change among farmers is just as important. Studies show that farmers' attitudes towards animal welfare are influenced by demographic, as you said, regional, cultural, and economic factors. But initiatives aims at raising awareness and promoting sustainable farming practice can make a real difference. For example, training programs and support for farmers have been set up to encourage practices that are better for both animals and the environment. So really what's needed is an integrated approach that combines strict regulation, proper law enforcement, and a shift in farmers' mindset. I've seen that some countries have managed to improve animal welfare by combining all those factors. Take the Netherlands, for example. Intensive farming there has been transformed through both strict laws and cultural change. Animal welfare laws, based on the five freedoms, set clear standards for space, care, and then practice like battery cages. At the same time, programs like Caring Farmers offer training, financial incentives, and awareness campaigns to help farmers adopt more humane and sustainable methods. And the government support, including compensation for reducing livestock number, helps balance economic realities with welfare goals. This example really shows how combining laws with cultural change can lead to meaningful improvement in farm animal well-being, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like a cultural change it's a key point. Like without that,
It will not be effective.
yes. Another challenge that we face is about animal experimentation. Regulations and enforcement vary widely, and millions of animals are still used in biomedical research each year despite progress in alternative methods. Interestingly, some species once used in entertainment, like primates, are now common in biomedical research, raising complex ethical questions about their cognitive needs and rights. Going back to the 3R principle we talked before, do you think a full replacement of animal testing is realistic in the next decade?
I don't think so because it's impossible to test on humans for ethical reasons. But yet, some products or compounds still need to be tested on living organisms.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of difficult to completely stop to test on animals as they are like a key point in their experience to test, education. The good point is that they
try to avoid it the most.
Yeah, and the tests in cosmetic field is prohibited, and it's very for medical and essential reasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Use them.
I think it's a very complex question, and there is a strong ethical drive to reduce and replace eventually animal testing in the next years. But from a scientific and regulatory perspective, a full replacement is not yet realistic in every field. For example, in recent years, progress have been very important. We now have organoids, organ on a chip technologies that replicate the physiology of human tissue, such as liver, lung, or intestine. We also have advanced cells culture and powerful computer models that can replicate many aspects of human and animal physiology. And these methods are already replacing animal in some areas. For cosmetic, as you said, and skin irritation tests, they have reconstructed human skin models, and it's widely used now. In toxicology, in vitro assays and computational toxicology are becoming more reliable. And in drug developments, for example, organ-on-chip system can stimulate some organs and sometimes are very accurately and maybe more than rodents in certain models. Sorry. So some estimates suggest that in fields like safety testing, up to 40 to 50% of animal use could be replaced by alternatives within the next 2 decades. If we continue to invest in validation and acceptance of these methods, of course. But there are still major obstacles. Biology is extremely complex, and all living organism integrates interactions between multiple systems, for example, immune system, nervous, endocrine, and in a way that we cannot yet fully replicate in vitro. So, for example, in studies, cancer metastases, infectious diseases, or neurological disorders, animal models still provide insights into systems processes that no cell culture can mimic with the current progress. For vaccine development, for example, it's also often necessary to evaluate human response in a living organism before moving into human trials. And now we still don't have any other solution. And even organ on chip technologies, they are very promising, but they remain limiting in scalability and in reproducing the complexity of our body over time. So, will we see a full replacement in the next decades? Realistically, probably not, but we can expect a progressive reduction sector by sector. For example, in the cosmetic and toxicological testing, maybe fully animal free in the next years, for example. And but yeah, the key will be combining innovative technologies with strict ethical oversight to minimize animal use as much as possible. And research is already going in that direction. We've actually seen a study by the Eurogroup for Animals that has been published last year. And for the first time, the use of animals decreased by 10.9% between 2021 and 2022, which shows an encouraging trend.
You give us good news.
Yeah, we can clearly see progress, and I agree with you that it's a full replacement in the next decades is not really possible, but like to replace as much as possible is a good step already. Now, we can talk about another field using animals that also face challenges, which is the entertainment industry. Indeed, many countries still use wild animals as tourist attractions. Like we said before, this includes elephants, big cats like tigers and lions. It also includes monkeys and camels or even marine wildlife. And unfortunately, many of these animals are kept in poor conditions with limited space and little consideration for their natural behaviors. So, without talking about zoos, aquariums, and everything, because we already talked about that, it's more like, the hiking. It's not hiking, but on the elephant's back.
All right.
Yeah, ride the elephant's back. camels and everything, or even I don't remember which countries, but you can take selfies with wild animals.
Yeah,
They're like
monkey,
chained. So now that we've talked about the challenges faced in animal welfare, we can wrap up this episode by looking up at some exciting trends that are shaping the future of animal welfare right now in 2025. So first, there's the One Health approach, which highlights how animal welfare is linked to both human and environmental health. Better welfare standards can help reduce the risk of zoonotic diseases and support overall ecosystem balance. Do you girls think the pandemic years made people more aware of how closely our health is connected to the health of animal and the planet?
Honestly, at first, I didn't think the pandemic had any impact on animal welfare at all. But while I did some research, I realized it actually highlighted an important connection. The animal welfare is directly linked to our risk of pandemics. For instance, in intensive farmings where animals are crowded and stressed, it makes it easier for diseases to spread between them and potentially jump to humans. And we've also seen that the illegal trade of wild animals, has a similar effect. Poor, stressful conditions create a perfect environment for viruses to emerge, as was suspected with the Wuhan market. And even some governments are starting to take this seriously, setting up programs to better control zoonotic diseases and raise public awareness. Actually, studies show that after the pandemic, many people have become more aware of the links. And so the pandemic really served as a wake up call for that protecting animals and the planet isn't just ethical, it's crucial for our own health too.
Yeah, I agree. It's like animal welfare isn't just about protecting animals, it's also about creating a healthier planet for all of us.
That's true, but actually, it's not the first time that we have seen diseases and virus spread by animals, and I do think yes, it makes a difference every time. For example, I was thinking about the mad cow disease. It was a neurodegenerative disease in cattle, first identified in the UK in the 1986. And it was caused by an abnormal infectious protein called prion, which damaged the central nervous system. And it was transmitted, spread because cattle were fed meat and bone meals derived from carcasses of other animals, including cattle. And it created a cycle of infections and it was an health crisis in the 1990s. And it was a public concern when it was discovered that contaminated beef could also cause human variants of the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which was a fatal brain disorder. So I do think it highlights the risk of an intensive and profit-driven farming system that ignore natural animal needs. And it also helped at the time. And I think it's also very interesting to see that each pandemic, each huge health crisis with our animals impacts that much the way that we put the welfare of animals in the center of the subjects and the questions.
Yes, that's interesting cases, and it shows that with the time people understand the link between everyone health, animal, environmental, and human health. So now to continue on the trends, we can also see trends emerging in the wild animals and entertainment field. For example, some marine parks are transitioning to sea sanctuaries where dolphins and orcas can live in large ocean enclosure rather than performing. And tech is also stepping in. For example, virtual reality safaris and immersive documentaries are offering tourists exciting wildlife encounters without actually exploiting animals. Have you ever seen these virtual or augmented reality wildlife experiences? And do you think they can replace traditional zoos and marine shows for the public?
Actually, I've never seen that, and I think it's a very good idea It allows to reproduce what we maybe used to see, but it's just more ethical, and I think it can be very well done. And yeah, I think it's a very good idea, and it's quite intriguing to see how in real life it can apply.
Well, doing my research for this episode, I didn't know it existed too. So I've actually found it during the research, and I think it's kind of interesting. I never saw that, and I didn't even think it was possible.
It's
but
innovating.
and if it can be a great alternative, like we can invest in that, and it's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree.
So to sum up on this episode, we can say that animal welfare today is about more than preventing suffering. It's about creating positive experience and ensuring animals' physical and mental health. From ancient time to 2025, we've seen incredible progress in laws, education, farming, and veterinary practice, but challenges remained, especially globally and in intensive systems. So that was it for today, and thank you so much for joining this deep dive into animal welfare. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it. And of course, keep thinking about how every choice we make can impact the lives of animals around us. Thank you!
Thank you. Bye.